Can you guess what this group of government workers were doing in early March on the west side of Tiananmen Square in Beijing? One source suggests that it was the Chinese army in civilian clothes using equipment to check for mines underground. This was when China's annual landmark political event, the Two Sessions, were taking place in Beijing. Security in Tiananmen Square is normally very tight with a heavy presence of plainclothes police. It's hard to imagine that anyone could have planted a mine here under tight surveillance unless it's an inside job. Now I declare the 5th session of the 13th National People's Congress of the People's Republic of China open. The Two Sessions, or Lianghui, in reference to the two meetings of the National People's Congress, NPC, and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, took place between March 4th and 11th in Beijing. Delegates to the two sessions are said to represent the interests of the general electorate in China and present the views and demands of their constituents to the relevant government departments. However, there are widespread questions about the existence of an electoral system in China, as virtually all resolutions pass with nil votes in opposition during the two sessions. Nonetheless, during the two sessions, China's premier is required to submit a government work report, which serves as an important window for the public to observe the direction of the CCP's domestic and foreign policies. The overall atmosphere of the 2022 two sessions is depressing and dull. Most officials looked nervous and heavy-hearted, a sign of the CCP regime in distress. On March 4th, when the meeting was in session, Beijing experienced peculiar windy weather. According to the local meteorological bureau, there was a northerly wind of force 4 to 5 with gusts of force 7 to 8 in Beijing on March 4th, and gusts of force 9 or higher in mountainous areas, accompanied by sand and dust. The astonishing part is that one of the gates of China's glorious palace, the Forbidden City, was blown down by high winds. It happened to the Taihe Hall, or the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The Forbidden City was the imperial palace of the Ming and Qing dynasties and took 14 years to build. Since its completion in 1420, it has a history of more than 600 years. The Taihe Hall is the ceremonial center of imperial power. It's the largest complex in the Forbidden City and of the highest rank. This is where the Ming and Qing emperors were enthroned. The empress was installed, and the 24 emperors held ceremonies. It's considered the first hall of China and a symbol of power. All palaces in the Forbidden City were made exclusively of wood. The Hall of Supreme Harmony has been burned and rebuilt in history. However, having the gates blown down by the wind is unheard of. Chinese Feng Shui, also known as Chinese geomancy, is an ancient Chinese traditional practice that uses energy forces to harmonize individuals with their surrounding environment. According to Feng Shui, the first of the three most important elements concerning human dwellings is the door. It's believed that the gate is guarded by the gate spirit. If the gate is blown down, it means that the protection from the gate spirit has grown weak. When the gate of the Taihe Hall was blown down by a gale, a sign that would have terrified ancient emperors, it seems to signal that the gate which symbolizes the imperial power has fallen and the palace has opened its entrance to welcome a new ruler. After all, the tribulations have subsided. China is about to transform into a new world. This might have affected the mood of the CCP officials at the two sessions. On the podium of the 2022 two sessions, Xi Jinping, China's president and current Communist Party leader, continued to enjoy 2 teacups to himself, while all other participants had only one. With CCTV, China's national TV, and its cameras focusing on Xi frequently, the 2 teacups made notable appearances each time, garnering viewers' attention. The 2 teacups also reportedly followed Xi Jinping when he participated in small group meetings. Why is it necessary for Xi to have double teacups? This is a mystery to many. It might be out of security concerns and could also be part of the anti-epidemic measures. But some in the media have suggested that the 2 teacups contain a political message. There is a Chinese idiom: when people leave, their tea gets cold, which means that when a person loses power, he will be treated coldly. Japanese media, the Nikkei, published an article in which it speculated that the two teacups in front of Xi seemed to make a statement that not only does Xi Jinping have this cup of tea at the moment, i.e. 10 years in office, which isn't cold yet, there is another cup of hot tea waiting for him, which means that he will hold power for a long time to come. In recent years, Xi Jinping has frequently warned officials not to be two-faced people. A two-faced person means someone who is outwardly loyal to the central government, that is, to Xi's administration, but secretly loyal to his political rival, former party leader Jiang Zemin's group. As the war between Russia and Ukraine worsens, there is a split in the top echelons of the Communist Party. Some of its top power holders, namely the 7 standing committee members, have raised questions about the justification of Xi's support for Russia's President Putin.
习近平 李克强、栗战书、王沪宁、赵乐际、韩正、王岐山等。
With old intra-party conflicts coupled with new hostility from the international community, Xi's challenge, even in his central government, is that he can't distinguish who is loyal to whom. Xi faces a dilemma that he can't tell who his de facto enemies are. The mystery of the two teacups is difficult to solve, but it's clear when the CCP faces its disintegration in the future, it may not be because of external enemies, but the power struggle within the party. Li Keqiang, the Communist Party's number 2 leader and China's premier, wore a sad face for almost the entire opening session of the National People's Congress on March 5th, although the usual nervous sweating wasn't present. Perhaps it has something to do with his job, as China's premiers are primarily responsible for the economy. In terms of real power and influence, Li Keqiang is no match for his predecessors and has always been considered the most powerless premier. Nevertheless, he has struck back a number of times. The most noted one was at a press conference at the 2020 National People's Congress. Li revealed that 600 million people in China earn only 1,000 RMB a month, or only $158 US. Yet Xi Jinping, the CCP chairman, had previously announced that Chinese people had been completely lifted out of poverty. That is to say, Li's remarks have brought Xi's accomplishments into question. At the 2022 sessions, Li Keqiang's government work report mentioned an expected economic growth target of about 5.5% for 2022. It's the lowest rate that has been set in the CCP's economic planning for decades. Keep in mind, China's official figures are usually watered down, so the real situation might be worse than presented.
实现5.5% 的
To achieve a 5.5% growth is kind of remaining steady at a high level, which essentially is to make progress. It's not an easy task. It demands support of corresponding macroeconomic policies. China's modernization is a prolonged process, and we have to address issues arising in the course of development using methods of development. As the state premier, Li must know that China's economy is slowing down and that small and medium-sized private companies are losing momentum. If things stay the same, China's economy could collapse on a dime. The most important reason for the economic slowdown is the extreme economic policies of the CCP. In March 2022, the outbreak resurfaced in China. While Europe and the US are gradually easing border controls and the economy is gradually recovering, the Chinese authorities are still imposing lockdown measures in many places. The overly harsh prevention policies have compounded the economic downturn. In a government system dominated by communist ideology, it's difficult for even economically savvy premiers to make a difference. In 2021, the Communist Party promoted a policy of common prosperity, the core of which is to distribute private wealth artificially through taxation and other tools. It called for voluntary charity donations from tech giant Alibaba Group and high-income earners. But it's led to questions and discussions about the CCP's attempt to rob people of their wealth. It's likely that the policy of common prosperity has now run into difficulties, and the Communist Party's top officials have likely realized that such a policy is very damaging to the economy. During this session, the policy of common prosperity has been kept on the down low. In presenting his government work report on March 5th, Premier Li mentioned common prosperity only once. At a press conference on March 11th, the closing day of the National People's Congress, a foreign media asked the question about how the CCP's common prosperity policy was concerning foreign capital. Li only replied, "When we say common prosperity, we want to work together," and then changed the subject. Premier Li tried to send a message that China will remain as open as before and expects foreign investors to feel secure in China.
对外开放的政策，中国
China has not and will not change its opening up policy, which is clearly stipulated in our foreign investment law. Should there be any changes, they will only be changes conducive to expanding, opening up, and promoting trade and investment.
有利于投资贸易的方向发展。中国太大。
China is so vast where you can find many individual cases if you wish, but from a holistic perspective, China's economy has deeply integrated into the world. Overall, we are still in the process of transitioning from the low end to mid-high level in the industrial chain, which, however, also indicates that both China's industries and consumption are upgrading. That means China has huge market potential with broad space for all types of investment. Premier Li Keqiang is familiar with the official rhetoric, and some of his remarks sound like diplomatic verbiage. But occasionally, he reveals some very solid data that isn't found in official reports. At a press conference on March 11th, Li ended his speech saying, "Employment pressure will remain high in 2022, with 14 million people added to the urban labor force in 2021, including a record high of 9.09 million college graduates, as well as employment for retired military personnel and the need to provide jobs for 270 million to 280 million migrant workers." He said, "Flexible employment is now on the rise in China and has involved more than 200 million people. Some people are working several jobs." Premier Li's comments confirmed our analysis of China's unemployment rate in an earlier episode. The accelerated shift in global supply chains has led to a massive number of Chinese migrant workers losing their jobs, a trend that is irreversible, leaving at least 200 million of China's 1.4 billion people unemployed. The CCP has branded the two sessions as a manifestation of public opinion. So, what impressive resolutions have the so-called People's Delegates come up with? There are quite a few, and we can see who these delegates are representing with just a few examples. For instance, a CPPCC member submitted a proposal titled, "Proposal to Encourage the Development of the Value of Human Resources for the Junior Older Population." He said, "My aunt is 102 and my uncle is 101. In my opinion, life has just begun at age 70. He said 66 to 79 years old are middle-aged people. He recommends introducing a flexible retirement policy as soon as possible, and to offer a tax incentive to companies that employ people over 60 years old." In response, Chinese people chimed in. If we go by this delegate's statement that 66 to 79 years old is middle-aged, many Chinese people may have reached their life expectancy before middle age. In reality, many job advertisements in mainland China show that most Chinese companies cap the hiring of new entry employees with the age limit of 35. Faced with such a requirement, job seekers over the age of 35 have little chance of getting a good job. The age limit for civil service examinations across mainland China is also generally 35 years old. Another delegate suggested shortening the 12-year primary and secondary school system to 10 years so that students could graduate early, get employed early, get married early, and have children early. Faced with the reality of a low fertility rate, the CCP has repeatedly relaxed its family planning policies and introduced policies to encourage young urban residents to have 3 children, but this policy has been ridiculed by people. A similar proposal is allowing single women to have 1 child. Many Chinese people have expressed anger, and others believe that it's intended for officials who have mistresses, laying down the legal legitimacy of having children out of wedlock. In addition, a CPPCC member and a professor at Peking University's School of International Relations called for legislation to ban fake news. If this proposal is enacted, it means that Chinese people will be further deprived of their freedom of speech. The CCP's 50 cents army would gain an even greater advantage. The CCP has a massive online army, often referred to as the 50 cents. In February 2021, the Digital Forensic Research Lab of the Atlantic Council, a U.S. think tank, released the results of a 9-month joint investigation that found that the CCP's online army has infiltrated foreign social media platforms. Since mid-2019, the number of registered Chinese diplomatic accounts has tripled on Twitter and doubled on Facebook. These accounts have assisted in fabricating and spreading false information across online platforms in different languages. Proposals like these don't make the delegates blush because under such a system, people can blurt out things they don't even believe without any shame.
越是形势复杂，任务艰巨。
Facing the more complex situation, the more difficult task, and the more diverse ideas, it's all the more urgent for us to raise the level of consultation to pool wisdom, seek sound solutions, and build consensus. Since the 18th CPC National Congress, the CPPCC has actively explored new practical ways and carriers of implementing consultative democracy so as to make new explorations and show a new image. On the new journey, we must further improve the consultation quality and consultation system and further cultivate the consultation culture.
要进一步培育协商文化。
In contrast to hollow rhetoric, the more substantive part of the two sessions is to see who has disappeared from the event. Since the two sessions have always been a gathering place for senior Communist Party officials and wealthy businessmen, most of the absences of officials are related to career changes, while most of the absences of business tycoons are due to complications. This is another trait of China's policy direction. This year, Xu Jiayin, a CPPCC Standing Committee member and chairman of the Board of Directors of Evergrande Group, China's #1 real estate group, was absent from the two sessions. According to Bloomberg, Xu was absent because he was told not to attend. This is the same Xu Jiayin who attended the 2012 two sessions when he was a high-profile, flamboyant figure who has earned himself a nickname of the Belt Man by Chinese people because of his eye-catching Hermes belt. In addition, Wang Jianlin, the chairman of Wanda Group, once the richest man in China, disappeared from the two sessions since 2012. The same goes for Alibaba Group founder Jack Ma, who has vanished from the two sessions. Back in 2018, media statistics showed that 56 Chinese tycoons had disappeared from the participant list of the two sessions. It was read as an indication that China's super rich were losing their political influence at an accelerated rate. In 2023, delegates to the two sessions are due for another term. We'll keep an eye on which of China's rich and powerful can hold on to their seats in these turbulent times. But year 2023 seems a bit distant for the CCP as a whole. The world is changing rapidly, in danger of slipping into war and an arms race with huge impacts on people's livelihoods. The debt crisis, inflation, unemployment, the effects of lying flat by many of the young Chinese, and economic stagnation caused by the outbreak could just be the few gray rhinos for the current Chinese economy. Gray rhinos mean the obvious risks that are neglected despite. Together with the diplomatic and military conflicts, Taiwan's strait problems, the calls to investigate the origin of the COVID-19 virus, and the aftermath of the war in Ukraine, these combined forces could suddenly capsize the Chinese Communist Party at some point.